Hey, Mom.
Hi, Dan.
So we're doing a just discussion today. We're not sure exactly what we're going to call it yet, but it's
Okay.
the topic that we want to discuss. We just talked about it beforehand is um, generational repression and maybe generational disconnection as well. Just like what happens as all this stuff comes down the line. Because there's a lot of stuff about generational trauma that I've seen out there, ancestral trauma and generational trauma, but not a lot of people talk about the repression aspect of it. And of course, that's what our work at the Kill Bee Inquiries and Natural Recovery from Suffering is focused on is getting to that unconscious repression that's in the body, so it ties in. So yeah, it's funny because I was doing this morning, I was recording a short. I've started to do more of these shorts lately where I'm just talking for about a minute or a minute and a half to the camera about different concepts um, and tools that we use in the process of this work. And I was sharing on it that in my being raised by you and Dad, it was like the way that I got by and the way that I survived that situation.
It's an interesting way to describe it.
Yeah, the way
That
that I
situation.
survived it, the way that I got through it and sort of coped with it, because both you and he had, and yeah, I know you'll talk about this, but had your own trauma and your own repression that was affecting you when you were younger. So um, was for me that I had to shut down my anger, and that's been in this work. I've been focused on my dominant repression, which is the repression that I'm most that my system is most afraid to feel and express. My dominant repression was anger and big energies like anger, like sexuality was another one. Anger, sexuality, power, masculinity. Um, and the reason I had to repress the anger, as I've gone through the work and I've done my own inquiry, the reason I had to repress the anger and the sexuality so much, but namely anger, was that Dad would there's many times I can remember when I was a kid where I would be sort of blindsided and he would like burst into a rage about something. There was one time in particular I remember where I was signing my passport and I signed it in print instead of in cursive. You probably remember this, and he took the kitchen table and like threw it across the room and was cursing, and I'm like in third grade or something and just like, deer in the headlights. Scared the hell out of me.
Scared me too.
And you too, right? And
Mm.
And so, anyways, the reason I had to repress the anger and sort of the bigger energies, the energies that would be like a defend, like that where I could defend myself or set a boundary in a situation like that as a kid, was because I just intuited that if I were to get angry, or if I were to try to speak up or get big in a situation like that, that he would just double down, and just attack or, explode on me even more, you know. So,
Mm.
so that's the pattern that I learned was I in the moment, like when that happened with the passport thing, I shut down. I just totally froze. And my system learned to push down and repress anything that resembled anger or power. So, and we always say this in the work, but it's like the reason that we are repressing our emotions, the reason that starts happening in childhood is because we're trying to stay safe and get love. And with him, it was definitely I was trying to keep myself safe. It was like I'm not going to show up as big in the face of him, dominating like that and
Mhm.
exploding.
Mhm.
So do you remember that before I go to the other side of it? Do you remember that situation of the passport thing,
I
or do you
do.
remember any others? Yeah.
I do remember. I remember those as being two separate um, circumstances. One where my recollection was where you signed the passport in pencil instead of in pen, and he flipped.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
And it was in his office, and he just, flew into, this screaming rage.
Yeah.
The other thing I do very distinctly remember him throwing the table over in the kitchen when we lived on Delwood Avenue. And it was something that he had said to you not to do. And I said it was okay. Like I sort of sided with you, and he got, he just threw the kitchen table over. And I remember both of us going, like we backed up. But I also remember that I didn't, didn't do a very good job of like processing that with you, of saying, well, wow, what did you feel? How was that for you when you did it? And I don't think I did a lot of that when you were growing up, because I'm not even sure why. I didn't want to, I guess I just didn't want to get in any more conflict than we already had, you know,
Yep.
and I was afraid of my own anger, because anger is my dominant. And I've often wondered, like with you being repressing your anger to stay safe with dad and to get my love, it was more like I've wondered if something about the way, like you and I both being anger repressors,
Yeah.
um what is it I want to say about that? I'm kind of losing my train of thought here. um
Like that we bonded in that, in the anger repression, or we bonded
for
in the pushing down of our power.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that because I was so afraid of my own anger, like, because it was so, I didn't even know. I mean, I don't know, can't even, I can say now I was afraid of it. I know now that I was afraid of it, but then I didn't even know I was angry. But I was not going to go there. I mean, unconsciously, I think the message was, you don't even go there. Don't even know that you're angry. Don't
Yeah,
even know
it's
it.
the
And
same.
so I probably did that with you as well. And when that thing happened with the pushing over of the table, I think that I was holding my anger down and unconsciously, and I didn't want to go there with you, because you would have triggered my anger. You know what I'm saying? It's like if you got angry, then I would have gotten angry, and that was off limits, just totally off limits.
Yep.
So yeah, but I remember both those situations. I just remember them being different, but the effect is the same.
Well, it's interesting that I tied them together in my mind, that it's like feels like that's the one thing. It's like probably like that's some kind of trauma thing where but what it did was it really like instilled in me, it's like I have to, well, of course I have to be hyper vigilant, but I have to make sure I'm doing everything right, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like I
Mm-hmm.
have to make sure I'm not
Oof.
making a mistake. And so anytime in my life, like after that, like before I started doing the inquiry and repression work, that for years, for like 2 decades probably, anytime I would have someone out of nowhere come at me with like, oh, you're doing that wrong, or you're, critical or whatever that was,
Oh yeah,
especially if they would get angry and come at me in that way, I would go into that same like lock up and freeze state.
fear. Yeah.
Fear, totally. And now what's in hindsight, after having done the anger repression work, I know, because if you had asked me that 10 years ago, I would say it's this person that's being aggressive or being abusive or being whatever, and they're scared, that scares me when people do that. But in hindsight, now I'm going, like you said, I'm scared that they're going to activate my anger. Like I'm scared of
Mm-hmm.
them doing that, that I'm going to have to feel and express this anger or this rage that's been buried in the unconscious body for so long.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and that realization that the thing that I'm scared of is internal.
Uh-huh.
Well, I mean, that's
It's a
such a
big deal.
yeah, there's such a freedom in there that, I mean, I have to do work on it, but there's such like a relief in that, like, oh my God, yeah, the thing that I've been scared of my whole life is in me. And if
Mm-hmm.
I could get into that and work with that fear and transmute that repression, and I can become more comfortable to feel and express anger and to integrate that into my life like a normal person does. Where anger,
Whatever that means.
yeah, a normal person, right? But yeah, but anger is like a normal human emotion to have, and it's like I never let
Oh,
myself tap into that resource, and so that's why it's such a freeing realization and also a process to get into that and to reverse that repression. So
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you said that because I was thinking the same thing about it. Anger is such a resource, and we deprive ourselves, not consciously, not intentionally, but we deprive ourselves of that resource. And it's a resource for like setting a boundary, like saying, if someone is coming at you, like you were describing, maybe not when you're a little kid and it's your dad, but in any given situation, now somebody's coming at you, you can say, you know what, this isn't okay with me. But if you don't have your anger as a resource, or hey, stop, I'm feeling disrespected, or no, you're misinterpreting me and now I'm angry. Like that's all. You have to have that kind of energy available to you, the energy of anger, in order to set a boundary, in order to say no, in order to keep yourself safe from risky situations. And so um, I think that prevented me both from protecting myself, but also from protecting you in situations like that. And it was interesting because I was thinking about it earlier today. I was thinking about how, on the one hand, I overprotected you, like in ways that were really not necessary. But you and I've talked about this before too. Like I had people needing me confused with people loving me, because growing up in my family, need if you needed somebody, that equaled that they loved you,
yeah,
that you
it's
loved
the
them,
connection. Yeah, yeah.
at need and love. And so um yeah, so on the one hand, like I needed you to need me, and I overprotected you in certain situations, which was, I think, a disservice to you, because you were totally capable of handling a lot of those situations that I tried to protect you in. And then in other situations where I think you really needed my protection, I didn't have my anger online and my boundaries online to be able to show up and say, whatever is happening, say with your dad, no, stop right now. We're leaving. That's not okay. We're
Yeah.
out of here, buddy.
Yep.
Not acceptable. So I can see ways that, although I thought then that, I was keeping the peace, like I was trying to sort of keep everything sort of even and peaceful and calm and less conflictual. But I see
Yeah.
now, that it was doing more harm. It was doing harm to me, to you, to your dad. It was enabling. I mean, it was like not saying, hey, what, whoa, we're affected by this. I'm affected by this. Dan's affected by this, you know. And and I think what you were saying too about realizing that it's not some circumstance or some person or some situation out here, because that was another thing that I think really came down generationally through both sides, Dave's family and my family, and then into our family, was blaming, like trying to find somebody to, if something went wrong, like I got to find somebody to blame,
Yes, scapegoat.
and scapegoating. Yeah. And that happened a lot in my family growing up. And it's extremely harmful. And like it, what was I going to say? Scapegoating, blaming.
You said,
Oh, I know. I was getting back to what you were saying about realizing that it's not that it's someone else's fault or even your fault. It's just that you're afraid of your own emotions. Like you don't like like for instance, I don't want to feel, like anger. Like I don't want to feel that. I don't want to feel that anger. So I try to get somebody else to change so I don't have to feel the anger, so I don't have to feel the distress. And I've done a lot of that.
yeah,
But now I'm realizing it's not like I'm it's like I'm really uh what I've done a lot is avoiding situations and people out here but what I'm really avoiding is what's in here and what has felt too scary to me to access because it was not, in order to belong, like in my family growing up, you did not express anger directly. You never said, hey, listen, this just happened and I'm really angry with you about this. You never, never, ever would that have been okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And you just disconnect from the person and then you talk to other people in the family about it and then you build alliances and then you're over against and I see how that played out in my parent both, especially my mom's side of the family and then into my family of origin with my mom and dad and brother and sister, and we're still dealing with the repercussions of all that. And then I also see how that's played out with you and I and dad.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I definitely, I mean, I remember we for sure scapegoated. Part of I think part of our bonding and our anger repression was we did the triangle and
That's him.
scapegoated him, like he's the asshole or he's the narcissist or he's, we didn't use that term then, but I did for a while prior to doing the repression work, when I started to get into the spiritual world, and there's so much stuff about narcissists and empaths on social media, and I got into that and I was like, yeah, the abusers and the narcissists and pointing at them, you know,
Yeah.
I got into that for a little while, but it's the same principle, what you just said. Like you and I would team up against him and make fun of him or whatever we would do, kind of like quietly and shittily and passive aggressively, towards him.
Quiet bullying. Yeah. We quietly bullied him.
Both
We
of
did.
us, you know what I mean? Like at the
I
same
know.
time. And I mean, I
Ugh.
think I owe him amends. I've said to him before, but I'm like, man, that had to be so hard to deal with, is these two anger repressed people, your son and your wife coming at you. Sort of, it's like the snakes in the grass, it's like we're the wolves in sheep's clothing, being like, oh,
Oh God.
poor us, and you're the one that's a jerk, and
Yeah.
so yeah, it's humbling to see it, but it's also powerful. It's freeing, and I think for him, it's been freeing. When I've had conversations like that with him, he's like, yes, thank you for saying that, like
Mm-hmm.
thanks for
Mm-hmm.
owning, and
Yeah.
so yeah, it's powerful, and yeah, and when you told, I remember going back to what you said about the protecting me, like when you told me that, I remember we were on the Blue Ridge Parkway, the hiking. And you
Oh
sat
yeah.
me down and you said, you're, I think you really were put in situations where there was abuse, where there was mental and emotional abuse, never really physical. You never got beat, but there was abusive stuff, scary stuff. And you said, and I
Yeah.
never protected you. I mean, it makes me emotional right now because I remember when you
Mm-hmm.
said that to me at the time, I felt like validated. I felt like my reality got validated, and I felt like there was sadness and both anger. Like really finally could start to feel my anger for you. Like I was angry that you didn't do that, that you
Yeah.
didn't help me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and it was just, I remember not knowing what to do with that because it was a really like powerful experience for you to sort of own it and make that amends. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and so anyways, I took that and took that into my practice and processed more of that anger. And you know, I thought, I used to think, it's not possible to be angry at mom. I mean, she and I are like tight, and she's the
Mm-hmm.
one, part of the reason that I'm still alive, which I think still is true, like that you had enough presence of mind and enough empathy and enough like availability for me that I just didn't like, because dad didn't have like, there were a little bit there for him every once in a while, but there was not that much with him. But it'd be impossible for me to just be angry at him, you know. I
Yeah.
mean, maybe consciously, I thought that I was just angry at him, but the more I go deeper into the body, more I'm like, I'm angry at mom too. I'm angry at you for this and for this. And so the ability to access that and to express it has been powerful, you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah. And I'm so
and
glad.
you with me. I mean, there's something, if you want to talk about it recently where you got triggered by something that I had said and you were able to, do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. I think because some of the the anger repression on my part has it kept me in a lot of ways from being able to show up for you because I didn't, like what I was saying before, like um, I didn't have access to my anger to say this is not okay. Although I can remember times with your dad where I did that, where like maybe after the fact, I said, Dave, that was not cool what you said to Dan or whatever, you know. But it never really landed because I wasn't able to come with the full, I wasn't able to bring myself fully online. I just didn't have access. And so I think that really, that's what I mean about how much harm it caused because the repression of my anger really had downstream effects on the way that I was not able to parent you, the way I was not able to show up for you. So there was a lot of guilt and a lot of shame about that, I think, on my part. And so what I did was I tried to so I would try to sort of do the perfect mom thing.
Yeah.
And I've heard you say, um, yeah, and let me just go in that direction. So I try to do the perfect mom thing. So what I got angry with you about recently was you posted something on the Killaby members area about a, a film, an animated film that came out, I think, back in
Coraline.
around 2000. Yeah, Coraline.
Yeah.
And the Coraline film was really about this imperfect mom who really wasn't showing up very well for her kid and how disappointed and the kid was and the kid wanted a mom that was a better mom, and so she went into this other dimension and had the perfect mom,
Okay.
but the perfect mom turned out to be this, you know, like the terrible, really turned out to be, was a sort of a spider in disguise and turned out to be the terrible mother. She was trying to look like the perfect mother, but she wasn't. And so there, she was sort of the other mother. So you posted some stuff about the other mother, and I thought, oh shit, everybody on the members area is going to think I'm the other mother. And I don't want them to, you know, it's like the shame. I don't want to be seen like, I don't want them to see me like that. And so that's a lot of how the guilt and the shame came up for me around all that. But I also, I, I, and, and, and to me, that directly relates to the fact that I was not able to access my anger uh, in a number of given situations, either with you directly or with your dad directly. Sometimes I did it with you, I think. I can remember you saying, I can remember you saying to me one time when I was still doing Young Life, when I was working with Young Life at Stanton, which is the high school the school that you went to as well. You said, "Why don't you treat me like you treat all these other kids?" And I thought, if I had really stopped and thought about what you were asking, I should have really gone a lot deeper into that question you were asking me. You know, well, tell me more what that means, Dan. Like what, like been curious about what that felt like to you, that I was like there for all these other kids. And what did that mean? That why couldn't I be there for you that way?
Hmm.
Um, but anyhow, that'd be interesting. I mean, I'd be interested to know that now, actually. What, do you remember saying it
I
to
think I
me?
do vaguely. Yeah, yeah. I think I'm trying to think of what I would have seen. I mean, I know you did groups with some of the girls, like campaigner groups with some of the girls weekly, where you
Yeah.
get really into it. Probably that where you get into like interpersonal stuff and you know get deep with them basically and talk about what's your relationship like with your parents and
Yes.
and so it felt I bet it was probably that where it was like she doesn't ever talk to me about that really.
About what the dynamic between the three of us and how it is for you. Yes.
Yeah, like that
Right.
doesn't happen. Like what you and I are doing right now and what we've done for the last, 10 years or so as we've
Hmm.
gotten into this world of this kind of work.
Yeah.
So we never did that then, and it would have been nice because I don't feel like I did that with anybody, really. I mean, I might have kind of with a couple people gotten on the surface level of it, but I could never go really any deeper than that, you know? It was too
Hmm.
scary. So I think that's
Yeah.
probably what I meant when I said that. Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. Oh, I so now I've often said that I wish that I knew then what I know now. You know,
Oh
I
yeah.
wish that I had done the work then, even a little bit of the work then that I've done now, because I would have done it so differently. I would have had that conversation with you many times. I would have said, "Well, honey, how does that feel to you that this just happened?" Or how does that how did that feel to you when we got into that conflict? Or how did this
Yeah.
strike you? Or how was that for you? Or how was that experience? You know, I and going back to what you were saying before about my coming to you and telling you that I was angry about your post on the members
Yeah.
area, like I that was a big deal. I mean, I had to do a lot of my work um, that week before I was able to say I was angry with you that you put that up there, that I was afraid that everybody was going to see me as the other mother. And then I thought, okay, I need to go even further with this, and I need to put it out there. I need to put on the members area that I got triggered by your post, and talk about what my what that stirred up for me.
Yeah.
And that felt important. It felt like important to be able to do, because I'm like you. I think that I have been really careful in terms of the sort of us being allies, and wanting to sort of maintain that allyship or that bond in some ways. It was really a trauma bond. And I think as you and I have done our own inner work, that it doesn't feel necessary anymore. It feels like there's more freedom, at least from my side. And I'm not saying I'm done with all my work. Certainly I'm not. I'm definitely still in process on it, but it feels like there's more freedom for me to show up more as who I am, and to show up more with my feeling, particularly my anger, because I've done a hell of a lot of work on anger, on reversing anger repression.
Yeah.
And I have been able to show up in situations where I'm I know it sounds bizarre. I mean, probably to a lot of people listening to this, they're going, "You couldn't just say I'm angry?" I mean, that sounds simple to a lot of people, but if you repress anger, that is not simple.
No,
There's a whole lot of conditioning and a whole lot of programming and a whole lot of unconscious, hold that back, do not go there, do not say that, do not let them see that. I mean, stuff that we have no idea is going on in here until we start doing this kind of work.
totally. Totally. And
And
it's
it,
so much. Oh, go ahead.
yeah,
Sorry. Yeah.
no, you go ahead.
Well, it's so much about the expression of it and then finally starting to
Oh,
express it. I mean, Ina said that to me today, where she's like, so much of this is about the ability to express it in whatever way you can, you know?
yep.
And for you, and I want you to talk about this next, about the generational thing, about how this like sort of formed for you and your family, like with Mimi and Dee Dee, with my grandparents, Mimi and Dee Dee.
Yeah.
Um, but the good girl and the good boy, I feel like you, because the good girl identity, right? Like I have to be good and take care of everybody. And then for me, the good boy, like I have to do everything right and,
Yep.
please mom or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. That is such a source of suffering, and it becomes so
Oh,
unnecessary the more that I'm able to access, feel, and express the anger. It's like I don't have to land in that identity of I'm the good boy or I'm the good person or I'm the spiritual person or whatever you want to call it. Because what I started to realize, doing this work is it's like any identity like that or belief about myself, even if it's one that causes suffering, is my safety. And it's my safety net against the buried anger and the buried emotions, the hurt.
oh,
Like,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yes,
so the more that I
absolutely.
can access and feel and express the anger, the less that I have to like default
Rely on it. Mm-hmm.
to that false sense of self, to the ego. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so maybe you can talk about that, like your experience with that and where it started and where you've seen it sort of come down the line a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was thinking when you were saying that about what Scott says about if we can't fully be who we are, if we can't be who we really truly are, then we have to identify with what's false. And that's what you were just describing. And I definitely had that good girl. You have to be nice. You have to be good. You 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 can't get angry, not directly. You know, you can. Uh, and if I try to think about if I saw my parents, did I see them get really angry? There was so much anger there, but it wasn't like real direct. It wasn't like out in the open. It was like
Yeah.
under the table. And so you I kind of got the message that we don't do that here. You know, we don't express anger openly here. We But the way that it got expressed was um, a lot of passive aggression, a lot of um, judgment and criticism and blaming, but not in your face blaming like this, but just uh,
Covert.
covert. Yes, very
Yeah.
covert. And I think that's where, for me, that good girl thing came. I thought, well, so I feel like I'm bad and I did something wrong. That's somehow that came down the line. And I think that both my parents felt that. I think that that is definitely a generational thing. I think my mom felt it and my dad felt it, and they dealt with it in very different ways that were hurtful to each other. Um, but I definitely somehow I absorbed that and felt I was bad and I'd done something wrong. And that's where the good girl, I have to do it right, I have to be perfect, kind of came from, like compensating, overcompensating for this belief that I'm bad and I'm wrong. So I've got to be the good girl and I have to do it
Yeah.
right, which led me then to do a lot of things that were, you know, like like my involvement with Young Life. Like I felt like good stuff came out of that, but I wonder now if how different it would have been for me if I hadn't had to sort of maintain that identity and maintain that image. If I could have shown up and expressed myself more fully, like been more fully who I was, both with my anger. Um, I'm just trying to think back about how I saw it happening in my family, that anger coming out. It was mostly in terms of the what felt like hostility, covert hostility between my parents, that there was something. My dad had a very controlling mom. I know this. I don't know that much about my dad's family, but I know his mother was massively controlling. And so one of the ways that he tried to deal with that or not deal with that was when he met my mom and they got married, he was unfaithful to my mom. Like
Mm.
he had to find ways to not be under her control because he perceived my mother as, he never dealt with his trauma bond with his mom, with his childhood attachment to her. And then my mom, coming from her side of the family, um, I'm pretty sure this was never said, but I'm pretty sure, and you and I've talked about this, that my mom was sexually abused by her dad. And so my dad acting out triggered all her unresolved um, trauma with her dad and probably her mom as well, but her dad for sure. And there was all this pain that they brought into the relationship and then they reinforced with each other because they didn't know how to deal with it. And so then they started drinking. And so they were trying to medicate their pain. And the pain was not it wasn't the problem wasn't that my parents were ended up being alcoholic. It was an issue, But that wasn't what was driving. There was a lot of pain and a lot of unresolved trauma underneath that was driving it. And that's why I think they ended up drinking, because they were just trying to medicate the pain that they didn't know what to do with and blamed each other for. So I'm born into the middle of this. Shit.
Welcome to Earth.
Oh, holy shit. So what do I do now? Like little, what do I do now? And so I was listening to Gabor Mate in a short video he did yesterday, and he was talking about when you come into a family as a child and there's trauma, you can either think, okay, these people are not, they there's something wrong here. There's something going on that I don't understand. They can't take care of me. I don't know if I'm going to be able to survive this. This is really scary. He said you can either like take that approach, or he said you can think, well, there's something wrong with me. There must be something wrong with me. And
Yeah.
maybe if there's something wrong with me, I can fix it and I can be better and I can develop the kind of identity that you're referring to. I'll be
Yeah.
the good kid. I'll do anything. I'll do whatever it takes so that, because it's got to be my fault. And he asked the guy, Gabor Mate asked the guy who was interviewing him, he said, now, which of those two do you think would be more protective of the kid to do? And the guy said, well, obviously the second one. And he said, that's exactly right. And that's what we do. That's what we do because it's too scary to face the reality that these people are not, they can't come through for me. So then what do I do?
Yep.
And that's where all this stuff starts. And that's where the repression starts. That's where, okay, if I just, not consciously, but somehow we must get the message that if I'm just this way and not that way, then maybe it'll be okay. So I repress, in my case, I repress my anger. I repress my sexuality. That was terribly that was terribly frightening, I think, for everybody in my family. Just anything that had to do with sexuality. My God, do not, that's damaging. It's dangerous. Do not go there,
Yep.
So therefore, as you know, how that got transmitted to you, at least from my side of the family.
Yep. Totally.
So, but that's not who we are. It's like we learn we have to somehow not be who we are in order to get cared for, in order to survive, in order to belong in this system that we've been born into.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's it's like I was talking with Dana, my wife, about it the other day, and because she is a hurt repressor, she mainly represses vulnerable emotions, and I repress anger. So we're sort of two different ways of showing up in the world. She shows up when she gets triggered, she gets real big and, and
Yeah, like your
controlling,
dad.
like dad. And when I get triggered in the anger, I get small and shrink, we spent the first part of our relationship like this most of the time, where I'm small and she's big. And the more that we're both doing the repression work, we're coming back to
More
really meeting each
balance.
other in our authenticity now, and it's really
Yeah,
beautiful. But on both sides of it, the problem is for both of us is I have to be something other than I am. There's a compulsion to be different. There's a compulsion to change ourselves.
yep.
You know?
Hmm.
Like for her, it would be, she would probably say, I can't speak for her, but she has said this to me before, where it's like, I have to, um, she has to be the bad girl, basically. Like she's always doing something wrong. I'm always hurting people. She has to believe that, like that's her identity that I have to like, and because she represses hurt, it's like that defaults her to that up position where it's like, she'll get real angry, attack you, whatever, and then she'll have all this guilt and remorse and hangover from it afterwards. Like, I'm the horrible person. I've done something wrong, right? And it's like, and I totally recognize that. And um, but it's the flip side of it for me. But it's still having to change myself, that I have to believe that I'm good, and I have to be, push my anger down so that I could,
Have
so
to
that I
be
can,
peaceful and have to be calm and
you
yeah,
know. And so that's why, I mean, that's why the repression works is so powerful, because we're going directly to that mechanism.
Hmm.
Because if I don't go directly to that repression mechanism, whether I'm a hurt repressor or an anger repressor or whatever, if I don't deal with that compulsion and that programming in the body that says you have to be different than you are, you have to be different, you have to push down your fill in the blank, you have to push this down, you have to show up differently, then we'll do what I did for 15 years, which was I went tried to do it in religion, I tried to do it in recovery and 12 step, I tried to do it in non-duality. It's like it's like that mechanism of I have to be different than I am transfers to each of these systems that I enter into, right? So in Christianity, it would be,
Hmm.
oh well, I have to be a Christian, I have to believe in this, I have to believe that Jesus died or that whatever. And so I have to be different than I am. I have to be different. I'm sinful, so I have to be different. I have to, or in recovery, it would be, you know, I'm an addict, so I can't use drugs or act out or whatever. I have to be different than I am. I have to not do that. I have to do this. So just reinforce, and in non-duality, of course, it's like, um, I have to be awake. I have to be, conscious. I have to be, so it's like
Hmm. Hmm.
tricky because it's like, it doesn't matter the
Hmm.
content of it doesn't matter the content, that function of like, I have to be different than I am. And that's what this work does, is um, it makes that conscious. And we come out of repression. And then as I come out of repression, I'm like, spirituality or religion or therapy or any of these things that I went to try to help me before just seems sort of irrelevant. I'm like, I don't need, that's not, if I can just be myself, I don't have to like
Yeah.
do some other
Buy
thing.
into.
I don't have to
Yeah.
add anything else to my life. I'm already just me, you know what I mean? So that's why I love
Hmm.
this work so much. But yeah, you were going to say something about that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. When I've been able to show up in any kind of way that feels honest and authentic, it's like I've spent so much of my life trying to control outcomes and circumstances and people so I wouldn't be distressed or disturbed or have to feel my anger or whatever it is I'm trying not to feel, whatever it is I don't want to feel and I want to avoid feeling. It's like whenever I've been able to do that and just really show up as me, it doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't matter about the other person's reaction. It doesn't matter if the circumstances change or not. It doesn't matter if I get what I want or I don't get what I want, because what I really want is just to be myself, is just to be free to be myself. I think that's what all of us really want at core. It's just that what this work shows us is that what prevents us from doing that is just our need to feel safe or get love. Like, no, 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 I've got to be safe. So I can't be who I am because I got to be safe. Or I
Right.
can't be who I am because I've got to get their love. If I who I am, I won't get their love. And so we're still like we're still responding as though we're that little kid in that family system that has to not show up fully as who we are because we won't get what we need if we do. Just it isn't true anymore. It isn't necessary and it isn't true. And it causes a tremendous amount of suffering because I think underneath that there's a life force in all of us that just wants to be who we are and to be free and to be free to express it. And and I think that's what this work enables. And it's not a magic bullet. It doesn't happen all at one time. It requires a lot of, you've got to keep showing up for it and you've got to keep making the unconscious conscious. And most of us don't even know we're unconscious. So it's like, what? You know, so there's a lot to it, but also it's just when you get a glimpse of what it's like to really fully step into who you are and to be fully alive and have all of your feelings online and be able to show up, you just go, wow, this is what I'm here for.
Yeah. 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 You're like, I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah. I don't need any of this other stuff to change. I mean, if I, I mean, I can, uh, because our wanting other people to change and circumstances and situations to change is what our parents did to us. It's what my parents did to me unknowingly, unintentionally, unconsciously. It's what we did to you. It's like that thing. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to, I want to be, and I feel like I'm coming more into a place where, I was talking about this in a session I did the other day with somebody. I used to really react to that thing in 12-step programs where they say, it is what it is. It's one of the slogans they use in the program,
Yeah, it is what it is.
12-step rooms. It is what it is. It used to make me furious. Oh,
Yeah,
don't give me that
because the subtext is like,
simplistic.
yeah, suck it up, suck it up. It is what it
Yeah,
is.
like it's like minimize. It feels like it's minimizing. But I think there's something to, I wrote it off, but I think there's something to it if you look at it in a different way. And I read this, I think it was Dan Harris or somebody like that, who paraphrased it and said, this isn't what I want. This isn't what I want, but it's what's happening. Here it is. And it really has to do with, I think it has to do with acceptance. I think it has to do with accepting the circumstance, the situation, the person, and not just other people, but accepting who I am. And I'm reminded of Byron Katie's quote where she says, "When you argue with reality, you lose, but only 100% of the time."
Yeah.
And I think when I resist what is in me, I'm arguing. I'm arguing with who I am. I'm arguing with reality, my own reality. I'm denying my own reality. And of course, I'm going to lose if I do that 100% of the time. And so I think there's really a lot to that whole uh, um, but we can't fully know who we are. We can't fully know what's unconscious until we bring it into consciousness. And that's really, I mean, I think that's really the bottom line of what this work is about. I
Totally,
mean, I've heard you
totally.
guys say it so many times. It's making the unconscious conscious.
That's it.
And then there's the freedom. Then the freedom starts to come online. Then there are alternatives. Then there are choices. It's not like you're just doing something automatically anymore that you don't even know you're doing. It's so habitual
Yep.
and it's so unavailable to you because it's running in the background. You don't even know it's there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That is exactly what the work is. It's actually pretty simple when you boil it down. It's making whatever's unconscious, usually the stuff that's in the body, the stuff that is out of my conscious awareness that's in the body, really skillfully getting down there and making that conscious. And then in that, it's like the freedom starts to show up and suffering, even though suffering kind of ramps up, the more you dig into the unconscious at first, it feels like it gets more intense. Eventually
Yeah.
it really does start to fall away, especially the more that we look at for the utility of the suffering.
Mm-hmm. How it serves, how the
That
suffering is
serves, yeah.
serving you.
How's it
Mm-hmm.
serving me? How's the suffering serving me? And people ask me all the time, they're like, well, how do I know if I'm repressed or how do I know if I'm not conscious or whatever? And I'll go, well, are you suffering? Are you upset about stuff? It's like DeMello, are you upset?
Yeah,
Yours,
there it is.
you're unconscious. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're upset, then there's the evidence. And I like how the inquiries really utilize that suffering really quickly. We don't just stay with it and go, oh, well, just, be mindful of it. And it's like, no, use that to get to the buried stuff so that you can unearth it, and get free. And to unless you have something else to share, I wanted to end us off reading the four measures of success, like
Oh, I love this. No, do it. Absolutely.
so I just pulled it up on my phone. It says, and this is how you know the tools of inquiry are working. If you're going through the process of deprogramming and reversing repression, here's the four things to watch for, the four measures of success, for the process. One is you begin trusting yourself and your own experience. Two, you start knowing what you want. Three, you recognize that life is supporting you. And four, this is my favorite one, you stop minding what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You don't have to control it anymore. You just, it just, it's like what we were talking about. It just happens. It happens, and you can flow with it.
Yeah.
Freedom.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Mom. I'm glad it's good to talk on camera. And uh, even though we do off camera a lot, this is good to film it so that
Yeah.
other people can sort of hear about our experience,
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, I'm glad because I don't think I'm guessing, I don't know, but I'm guessing that um it's rare. I think being able to having a couple, at least a couple people, and now there are three of us because your dad's doing the work too. It's like in one family that are able to have conversations like this about, well, hey, this is what happened, and this is where I need to make amends. This is where I blew it, and um, this is how I felt. How did you feel? Just to sort of have some kind of way to dialogue about things that would have been great if we could have done it then. We couldn't for various reasons, but we can now, and just to show people the potential, the possibility that that you can have these kind of um, connections, even if you miss them earlier in your lives, if you do your work.
definitely. Yeah. And it's funny because you guys doing especially the Killaby inquiries and natural recovery from suffering, this process, I never imagined that, like at some point, I was probably in my early 30s when I started doing it. I really just was like, I just got to focus, like they say in Al-Anon, keep the focus on myself and do
Yep.
this. So I just threw myself into it. And then, a year later, you went, "Hey, what's that thing? What's that thing?" And then a couple years after that, Dad went, "Hey, what's that thing? What's that?" So yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I think it's contagious. I mean, it can be. I mean, if people are at all open and willing, that there's a lot that can be addressed, and if one person in a family does their work, it opens the door. It opens that door for other people. And you in this regard, in regard to the repression work and the Killaby inquiries, you were that person who opened that door, and then we went, huh, hmm, maybe we could walk through that door. Let's see what's on the other side of that door. Let's see what happens. And part of it was I knew that when you started telling me about it or telling us about it, I thought, okay, well, we're implicated here and we need to pay attention, in a way that when you were younger, I couldn't, I couldn't, I just, I couldn't show up for that and say, oh, I'm implicated. I wouldn't, I, for whatever reason, maybe I had done enough work up to the point where you started doing this work that I was able to step through the door. That there was work that I had done before that, but up until that point, I don't think I could have said, "Well, let me see. There's stuff here that I need to look at. This is important. There's some important stuff about me that I need to see here."
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, and this is I'll end it off with this, but this is the principle of taking your hands off of other people and focusing on your own work, like how I did. I mean, that's the fruit
Yes.
of it in our experience, is you guys both it gave you the space to address your own stuff and your own transformation. So
Yes.
that's a powerful principle, because as long as I'm trying to get people to believe this or to do this or to not do this or whatever it is,
Or
then
to
I'm
change.
I'm guaranteeing that I'm locking in place the that dynamic, and I'm guaranteeing that they'll continue to stay the same.
Yeah.
So
That's maybe sort of the definition of codependency, huh?
yeah,
Yeah. Well,
well,
thanks, Dan. It's been good. It's been good to talk. And
definitely awesome. Thanks, Mom.
mhm.